Hello and welcome to Small Business Snippets, the podcast from smallbusiness.co.uk. I'm your host, Anna Jordan. Today's guest is Greg Bateman, former Rugby Union player and founder of craft beer brand People's Captain. Launched in November 2020, People's Captain came into being to bring positive mental health to the fore and to encourage meaningful conversations over a pint. Beer brewing started as a hobby, but as the process was so healing for Greg, who was struggling with mental health issues at the time, he decided to go ahead and create the business. We'll be talking about how to make the most of collaborations with other businesses and tips for a successful trade show. Hiya, Greg, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight in here today. So we talked a little bit about the intro about your career in rugby union, and you've since moved through to entrepreneurship. Could you talk to us about moving from being pro rugby player to becoming a full-time entrepreneur?
I don't think I ever had I'm going to stop playing and then I'm going to go and do this entrepreneur thing. I've always had experiences and been doing stuff while I've been playing anyway. Maybe not always, but I certainly started that journey fairly early. I wanted to experience lots of different things. And actually, when I go into companies now and talk about mental health in the workplace, I really encourage people to try other things and have other identities, because that's what helps build resilience, is having other hats that you can put on when times are tough. So I think I was well prepared, and also spent my time at lots of different companies to just get lots of different experiences.
Absolutely, and I'm sure all those different experiences helped when you were growing and developing the business.
Yeah, I think so. I think probably an important part of that was learning what I didn't want to do as much as what I did want to do. I would learn about the types of cultures and experiences I liked being around, rather than what I didn't, and that's kind of helped me form a really strong sort of opinion of what great cultures and what great workplaces look like. So that's kind of how I've spent my time, I suppose.
And I've read before that you've said you've got to be quite careful about the opportunities you've chosen. And you've collaborated with a few other brands that are aligned with yourselves. So Tony's Chocolate Only, Jose's Coffee, For Pure. How do you decide which businesses to collaborate with, and how does it benefit a business?
Collaborating is a great way of two companies that have similar audiences but different solutions or different offerings to get in front of each other's audiences. What we realized pretty quickly is that it's really, really hard work and really expensive to put your brand in front of the people that you're targeting. Those audiences probably already exist somewhere, and they're probably looking at similar products or similar types of companies. So if you think about People's Captain, we're a mission or a purpose driven company, right? So Tony's, Easy Jose, For Pure, we got a collab coming out with Budgie Smuggler in May as well, because they've got something to say. And I think there's a business side to it. Is channel growth and partnerships definitely are a better way of acquiring customers than just out and out paid activity. But also what it does is strengthen relationships, and it's really, really fun. I think we were sort of talking a little bit in the intro earlier on about learning, and I think for me, going and talking to really, really well advanced companies that are ahead of us has really helped me learn what good looks like, and that's really important.
Yeah, so you've got a bit of marketing, mentoring, a bit of everything all in one there.
100%. And I think even now, like for example, we're a beer company, so we might sell through a wholesaler, or we might sell to a big national pub company, or whatever it is. And I think by approaching things with that kind of what is there to be learned, what can be done differently, and asking sometimes almost the naive questions, actually you get permission to challenge the status quo, rather than turning up and thinking you've got all the answers, which I definitely don't have. I'm trying to make a real impact on social change and use social moments to make that happen through beer. There's people that know how to run pubs and run wholesalers way better than I do, but they know how to do something I don't. So I spend my time trying to sort of rework out how I can support what they're doing to be able to do it. And I think that's a good way of explaining how partnerships often work is, what are you guys trying to achieve and what are we trying to achieve? And then let's make the partnership work for both parties, and then it's all good.
Yeah, and I suppose even for listeners who are wondering who they can partner with, it's easy enough to sort of find other businesses in your community and ones that have shared values like you do with the businesses that you've collabed with.
I think also having pretty strict, not rules, but like guidelines on what works, right? So we get approached every now and again to do different stuff, or I might go and approach somebody and see if we can do something together. And if it's us doing all of the work, all of the cost, all of the everything, that's not a partnership. That's me paying for some marketing activation. And I've had to say no to some really, really big opportunities, but it's because I know that that's not a partnership. That's just me paying for some work, and I'd rather work with people that want to do stuff together, because that's how you get the most out of it. Otherwise, you might as well pay to be in somebody's brochure. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's such good advice. When we're talking about partnering as well, especially for a young drinks company, part of the growth is finding pubs and shops that will stock your drinking. I've read how difficult that is to do, and having to go to the pub with a sampler and trying to follow up with a whole load of emails. How
But that, to be honest,
how was the experience of that for you?
yeah, that's the easy bit, to be honest, because I don't think I've ever had, I'm trying to wrap my brains here now, I don't think I've ever done a pitch, a tasting, a sampling, had a conversation where someone's like, I don't get it. I don't get what you're trying to do. Don't like the liquid. Everybody's keen to get stuck in. The hard bit in drinks, particularly with beer, is that companies have their own wholesalers and suppliers that they use. So you have to sort of win the business, then convince them that the wholesalers that they should take you on and have you on their shop floor, and then go around. So you kind of have to sell to two people, and the wholesaler has no emotional interest in the transaction. They just want to know that the stock's going to move through quickly enough. So I think it's much more about the operations and commercials backing up the great intent. And I suppose the other thing I'd say, I'm trying to think as I'm answering your questions about what's generic advice that's outside, because I appreciate not everybody listening is going to be in the beer industry or drinks industry. But I think really trying to have a handle on turning great conversations of intent into action and meaningful sort of business for both parties. Otherwise, we're all just slapping each other on the bums and saying how good we are, or we're doing something.
How would you go about finding that intent and making sure that you're on the same wavelength?
Yeah, I think you try and catch it as early as possible and get as much information as you can up front. What I generally try and do now would be, when we start that conversation with someone, I'll say, you tell me how we should work with you. What is the blueprint to success? Do I do this bit? Do you do that bit? And just literally blueprint it out. Go, okay, this is step one. I need to come back to you with this many accounts, or I need to have these pubs signed up, or whatever. Then you've got something to go back on, because you can say, you told me this, I've done this. Now I feel like we're at step two. And that's the conversation, right? But along the whole journey, I definitely feel like this is a relationship business, and making good relationships is a massive key to all of this, for sure.
I suppose in that vein, it kind of helps to know people who know people in the industry when you're starting out.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, beer is quite incestuous, and everybody sort of knows everybody. And You know, the guys who I learnt to brew with, he was very senior at one of the national brewers, and he sort of knows everybody because he was there for such a long time and has introduced me to people, or a friend of a friend of a friend. And if you've got the right introduction, that massively helps as well. But you only get that by delivering on what you say as well. I think I've probably been quite conscious of that along my journey. Is one of my school teachers told me when I was playing rugby and going well when I was younger, never piss anybody off on the way up because you'll meet them on the way back down. And it's really true when you're trying to build a business, is that you do never know who that person knows. It doesn't mean you can't have a direct conversation, but you just have to, have really solid integrity and just push forward. And I suppose the other thing I'd say on that is integrity. I've definitely been on the losing side of that in my whole entrepreneurial journey. I started a property company with somebody, and they started a very difficult, acrimonious finish to that relationship, and I ended up buying them out of that scenario way over what they were due. But it's because I never wanted somebody to turn around and say that I'd not delivered what I said. And that's happened on several occasions with several relationships. But I know hand on heart that nobody could ever say that I've done them over. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. And when you're in business and you do have that reputation for always delivering or even over delivering, then that's going to, as you say, pay off in the longer term.
Hugely. And a great example of that, of delivering, I suppose, I mean, no pun intended, but our first ever trade deal was with a really, really big pub group, and they're amazing to deal with. And we have a strategic partnership with them now. But our very first delivery into them, our truck driver was ill, or the doors fell off, or the wind was blowing, or whatever the reason was that it couldn't get there. So my business partner was in a truck himself to get the beer there. It was a day late, but he did absolutely everything he could to get the beer there. And we still got an absolute earful because of deliveries, etc., and it's never nice to miss a slot. But I know that has brought us a lot of credit because we did what we said we were going to do. By hook or by crook, we made that happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you can earn a lot of trust by doing the basics really well. Business isn't particularly complicated, is it? You got to figure out who's going to buy your product or service and find a way to get it to them. And I think we can spend a lot of time overcomplicating things, and you just got to do what you say you're going to do, and people know you're reliable. But that's often why, say, like big retailers don't pick small businesses, because they're not often very reliable. So you can make a good name for yourself and make a lot of hard yards by just being really reliable and good people to do business with. Goes a long way.
I suppose, yeah, as well as you say, sometimes it does involve direct conversations.
Yeah, but I mean, you just can't be afraid of confrontation. And I say that as somebody probably who's not, I don't think I'm particularly good at confrontation, as in, because I'm quite an emotional person. I will take it quite personally because I don't like to let people down. But I think, remember what I said earlier on about being really transparent and upfront. What's step one? What's step two? What's step three? How are we going to build this together? Then you kind of know what your expectations are from the outset, really. So you then know where to go. And I kind of feel like once you know what those expectations are, then you know when they're entitled to be direct with you, and likewise when you're entitled to be direct with them.
Yeah. And a big part of building the business for food and drink is trade shows and getting involved in those. From your experience, what would be your top tips for listeners who want to get involved in a trade show, maybe their first one?
Yeah, and I haven't done a few trade only as well as consumer and trade shows. I'm yet to see an out and out trade event that's been really, really good, because like our customers, for example, are pub groups, and that's who we want. If you go to an event and you don't have pub groups, but you've got lots of people with independent pubs, it's still great, but you'd rather sell to someone that's got the buying rights for 25, 50,000, 2,000 pubs than one, right? Because otherwise you've got to do a lot of singles to make up for it. But I think you got to know the audience, and then you got to know how you're going to stand out from the crowd. So we're very lucky that Nathan is a massive part of our business and the artwork, and it's very attractive to people. But also our story. How do we tell a story when people come over? So we use the art, we use our language, and we're very well drilled is the wrong word, but like we know exactly what we're saying when we're saying it. This is how we invite people to make it count. Have a great conversation. We donate to mental health initiatives with the sales of the beers, or we can help you and your teams with their mental health needs as part of us doing business with you. Just really simple. And I think the other final piece I'd say on trade shows is there is so many people that go to these things as people that are just walking around, but actually they're trying to sell to you, and just knowing pretty quickly whether they're trying to sell to you, and it might be of interest and you might need it. Being very polite, not here for that today, going to take your details and get back to you next week. If it's of interest, I'm here to sell to these guys. And that's knowing that you have the permission to be really polite but direct about what you're there for and what you're trying to achieve, and be very, very sort of precise about that. Also, on the other side, the consumer side is that's not a business proposal. That's like sampling, getting the product in people's hands, getting them to have a great time, a great experience, and interaction with the brand, and to come away with an amazing impression of you. And I think that's just knowing, I suppose, what you're there for is probably the starting point to then make that an awesome show.
Absolutely. And as you were saying, the conversation, the way that you would approach people is completely different. It's a lot more emotive at the trade show than it is to the wholesaler. So, of course, that then comes back to knowing which audience you're addressing and how to adjust. I mean, to keep the same core line, but to adjust it to whoever your audience is.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to know what's going to make them tick, right? So a consumer's, for us, like consumers are so much more conscious nowadays. So we give them a lot of reasons to believe in us as a brand, that we're a really conscious choice. Retailers are more conscious, but they also want to make some money, and they also want to look after their staff. So we give them those reasons. And then the people in the middle, say wholesalers, often are much more transactional. But having said that, I work with some who are the most amazing people you've ever met in your life, and I've just been there this week, and I won't name them in case it embarrasses them, but it's way more than just a transactional relationship, just a real personal will to help us and for us to help them.
I'll finish on a question that you do get a lot, but it is a nice question to end on. So if there's somebody out there thinking, I want to start a craft beer or any kind of drinks business, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to be really sure of the how they're going to do it, because nobody's really thinking about the why or the what, because otherwise it's not going to be successful anyway. If it's not got something that's really going to get somebody to choose from a massive brand or like whatever, you have to have that anyway. So and I know that's probably the answer most people give you, is like the why, like what problem are you solving, the purpose, the whatever. But I kind of feel like that's hopefully quite obvious from my story and what People's Captain is trying to do. So I don't want to give you a really obvious answer. I think the how is probably really, really important. And that's actually where the value of the business in terms of exits and generating revenue and making sustainable growth is on getting absolutely spot on the how, and being very clear on how you're going to achieve it. But then thinking about what I said earlier on about step one, step two, that is definitely step two. The step one is the really important bit, but People's Captain is from such a personal why that it's almost so obvious to me, if that makes sense. So I think that's probably my very long-winded answer for you.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll end it there. But yeah, thank you again for coming on the podcast, Greg.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
You can find out more about People's Captain at peoplescaptain.co.uk. You can also find more tips on doing a trade show at smallbusiness.co.uk. Remember to like us at Small Business Experts, follow us on Twitter at Small Business UK, all lowercase, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, linked in the description. Until next time, thank you for listening.